I remember when dot-com boom was happening.
Yeah.
And it was going to be everything. And then, iPhone and big data and blockchain and like cryptocurrency and crypto. I joke like cryptocurrency was going to, solve all of technology and do my taxes for me. And then it really ultimately, and now it's AI, right, is the thing that everybody talks about. And but to your point of being appropriately paced, there's this sort of like super hype curve.
Yeah.
And then things, it's going to do everything for us with every new innovation. Then it bottoms out.
Yeah.
But there are actually real beneficial and disruptive opportunities that are born out of those technology innovations. And then it starts to kind of come back a bit, right? In terms of sentiment and hype and all that sort of stuff. And I think, like, for example, like with AI, we're kind of on the downslope, like the roller coaster has just kind of tipped over the edge. And I think some people are going to be brought down to earth a little bit, but there's also very clear applications that we're using right now that are really beneficial to what we're working on. And again, I think it is appropriately paced. I don't think tolling technology ought to be on the bleeding edge of anything, frankly. But we also don't want it's striking the balance between we don't want to be left behind, but we also don't want to be the first one through the wall kind of gets bloody, let's say. Now
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Toll Talk. I'm one of your hosts, Kalie Jakovics, and with me I have
Alex and Kalie.
And we want to thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a very special guest, Brad Wright, CEO of NextMove. So, Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to join and grateful for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to learn a little bit more about you, about NextMove, and you guys have a lot of innovations and things happening. So we typically like to start with kind of learning a little bit about our guests.
Yeah.
So tell us, where are you located? How'd you get into the industry?
Yeah, sure. I'm located in Austin, Texas. I actually live in Georgetown, which is a smaller town a little bit north of Austin. I've been in the industry. I'm still pretty new, actually, to the industry. I've been in the tolling space for about 3 years. I think considering most of the people's tenures, I feel like a bit of a baby in the space. But how I got to it was I've been in the technology startup space for quite a while, 20 plus years. Most recently, prior to this role in NextMove, I was a chief technology officer at a tech startup. And I got connected with the Cintra team, which is our parent company. So the way that NextMove is related to Cintra is we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Cintra, which is also a ferrovial company. So ferrovial is a big multinational infrastructure company based in Madrid. And they have essentially 4 divisions. There's a highways division. There's some newer ones, but the main divisions there's a highways division, a construction division, there's an energy division, and an airports division.
Oh,
My team, Cintra, is the highways division. And so we are a startup company within the context of this broader sort of multinational publicly traded company. So that's kind of where we fit. I got connected into this space. It's interesting because if you had asked me when I was in 5th grade if I was going to be leading a technology company in the tolling space, I don't think that would have made my bingo card.
Does anyone ever really think that? No, I don't.
That's right.
Involved in tolling.
No. But I have to say, it's very interesting as you get into it and you learn more about it. I think you have a much deeper appreciation for it.
Okay.
And frankly, like on a personal level, I've never really been all that interested in the actual technology that I've been working on as much. And that might sound bad, but meaning like I care a lot more about who I'm working with, what problems we're trying to solve, what we're trying to accomplish as a team, much more so than like, I really want to be in fashion tech, right? Or whatever, right? Like that's never really been how I think about things. And so, I've been at the team for about 3 years, and I was employee number 1 on the team, and now we've got a really growing and I would say thriving team, and really excited to be here. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can tell you, so we are, as well are a little newer, not as new as
Mm.
you, but we've been doing this now for just about 6 years. We have our company, our day job, so to speak,
Yeah.
Mojo,
Mhm.
around over 21 years. August,
Yeah.
it's coming sneaking up on us.
Wow.
But as far as total and infrastructure, yeah, only about 6 years. But I can tell
Mm.
you,
We
like,
fell in love with it.
yeah, I fell in love too. Yeah, I don't know, I couldn't explain it, but it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fantastic.
It
So
found us, so
yeah,
we love it.
it
So.
definitely does. So that,
Yeah.
but kind of curious. So now you've been in the industry 3 years. Just kind
Mhm.
of, I'm really kind of interested in hearing about your view on the evolution of tolling, right? And what you've seen coming from an outsider, because that's I think the vantage point what we all bring just on the show, right? Not the show, but the participants anyway.
Yeah.
That we're relatively new. We've come from different
Mhm.
sectors, private, the military, government, wherever you're coming from.
Mhm.
And so I'm kind of curious what you see now that you're in the industry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'd say I would say a lot. It's very interesting. I think that the ability to have a new perspective, a fresh perspective is helpful,
Mm,
because as with any industry, you kind of get lost in the weeds,
sure.
and I think that having a new perspective is helpful. And I think I'm going to answer your question, but I want to kind of touch on something else so people have a little bit of context about
Sure,
like
sure, sure. Go ahead.
what exactly is it that we do.
Right.
And so Cintra is primarily a P3 company. So we do public-private partnerships, and been in the space for a long time. Lots of presence in North America as well as globally. So we do work all over the world, and they do a ton of innovation. They were or are the operators of the 407 in Toronto, as I understand it, the first free flow toll road in the world. And so for a long time, Cintra has been innovating, right?
Yeah.
And NextMove, our team, has been born in some capacity out of the innovation of the Cintra team. And I think that's relevant in answering your question, how the tolling space is evolving. Because when you think about tolling, and this kind of links to my outsider's perspective a little bit, you think about tolling, these projects last really long time,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you think about the technology evolutions, they can be very slow, and it takes a lot of energy and, frankly, a different skill set to
Yeah.
see those innovations materialize into something that works in the real world, right?
Well, and I want to just interrupt for a moment and then
No, that's fine.
think about it. I mean, most people, when they think about this, they remember gated toll booths, right? They
100%.
they see those. They see now we're talking transponders. What is this white little device I stick to my
Hmm.
right? And now there's new technology here, and so
Hmm.
the public, we have a duty to not only just get them on board with it and use it,
Hmm.
right? But there is a bigger vision and mission behind it all. And so I think, it is, people don't always appreciate the level of effort that goes into it and the impact that it can make. So I'm sorry, I just want to kind of throw that out there.
No, 100%. And I would also say that within, like, kind of part of the reason why NextMove exists is largely there's a different skill set
Mm,
in creating, bringing to market, operating technology than there is in operating a roadway, right?
yep,
And so whether you're a public sector operator or private sector operator, it's a very different role. The cycles move much, much faster. And if we're going to be participants in innovating within our own roadways, which we do quite a lot,
Mhm.
sure,
it makes a lot of sense that we would have a separate kind of division, which is what NextMove is,
right,
that is responsible for kind of managing that technology and bringing it to market. And so now, in terms of the evolution of tolling, you spoke about it well. I remember not having transponders whatsoever. I remember going through gated toll booths as a driver and dropping my 50 cents in. Obviously, transponders have been around for quite a while,
sure,
which is a good thing. But also, frankly, when you look at the technology on the roadways today, like how many hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested in gantry technology every year?
Mhm.
oh yeah,
If you think about what the OpEx is alone on managing and maintaining that infrastructure, what we're trying to do in this evolution, let's say,
Yeah.
is kind of thread a needle of, and this is sort of very much my startup my startup founder kind of mindset, let's say.
Okay.
Where and I talk to my team about this all the time. They get quite, I'm sure, exhausted with me saying this. But it's like, okay, how can we have an eye on
It's the CEO
Sorry,
thing.
I can
yeah,
relate. Yeah.
yeah. How do we have an eye on the vision that we have for 7 to 10 years down the line, but also make sure that we're taking steps that are tactical and practical for right now, right? And managing both of those things at the same time. Like that's the tension, I would say. And so a lot of what NextMove is focused on, really, we kind of have a portfolio of products that we work on.
Yeah.
Road usage charging, congestion pricing, toll payment applications, a connected vehicle ecosystem project that we're working on with Oregon, and a few other topics. So like we're managing connected infrastructure. So these are the things that are within our responsibility. And, we look at these technologies and we see in the future sort of a convergence of how these things might, evolve the way that we do what we do in the tolling space.
Sure.
And have material impacts. And then again, kind of strategically to help connect the dots within the Cintra ecosystem, when we win these concessions, right? When we win these projects, we're in it for the long haul. I mean, these are 50 to 100-year agreements. And so we have to have our minds focused on what will happen in 10, 20, 30 years, and as well as what is necessary today in order to see that take shape. And so that's a lot of what we focus on, and that's how we're thinking about, I would say, broadly, and we could talk more about that, I'm sure, but broadly, like how are we approaching this sort of evolution of the tolling technology?
Yeah, because with 100% collection rates with the toll booths, and then there's transponders. I mean, that is great, but it has created some issues, obviously, collections. Now I want to touch on the mobile app as well, what you guys are doing with that, which also may be better than the transponders. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that, that it was, better per se. The mobile application that we have in market today is called NextPass. It's been in market. Really, we launched in early 2023.
Okay.
We've seen a lot of demand. It's essentially a toll payment application for users. It's license plate based. So the technology is out there on the roadway today. And like when you think about what the demand is for that product, and why consumers use it, there's a few things that that we see from our customers as to kind of why this is of interest. One is the ease of registration. When you think about, we love our public sector partners, but the public perception is not always positive in, oh, I've got to go register, and it varies wildly, right? There are some agencies that we work with who have excellent reputations in the market. Consumers love them. They've got great ratings and so on and so forth. But then there are others where consumers don't want to go get a transponder for whatever reason, right? They don't, and this is a sort of a second kind of key thing within that application. They don't want to do prepayments. We see our number one response from consumers as to sort of why they're interested in having a payment option like this is they like the fact that it's pay as you go. So as a consumer, I can just download the application, I can register my license plate, I can add a payment method, and I'm effectively good to go. And they like that. We sometimes think, oh, it's not that big of a deal to pay $50 or $100 or whatever it is in the given region in prepayments to fund my transponder. But not all consumers sort of feel that way, right?
I can attest to that because years ago, I was thinking like, why can't we just use it on our phone, like a mobile app, and make it so much easier? And I'm a millennial, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But you have to think about the audience segments, the customer journey, that experience.
It does, yeah. And that's the real thing. To Kalie's point and your point, I mean, people have different expectations set by other surrounding influencers, right? They're scrolling on Facebook, or they're going to Chick-fil-A, they're going to any of these different mediums, and they have expectations that are set for them, and they get comfortable with those, right? And so they start to condition themselves. Well, why would I have to give you $50? It doesn't,
right.
I can just unlock my app, look at my, scan my face, and next thing you know, it's paid, right?
Right.
Kind of, I mean,
Yeah. No,
you're not wrong,
and
Kalie.
I think also in woo,
For the first time.
I think in today's world too, where there's with increasing fees and costs and everything, like for some people it's like, oh well, I don't like I might not have the means to put $100 towards this right now for tolls or whatever that looks like. So
and I think part of how I look at that product broadly is, and this is this is a conversation we have a lot with the tolling authorities that we work with. The idea here is not to erode per se transponder penetration in the market, for sure. No. The idea is like what you see in a market, and as a toll road operator, right? Like we are a toll road operator. We have a very unique kind of firsthand look at the realities and challenges of this, that even in a market like Virginia, for example, where toll transponders are required, or you're a violator, you still hit a threshold where there's 5 to 10% of your users who just won't get one, right? And then furthermore, in other markets where they're not required, where there's pay by mail, you often see, no matter what you charge, there's a threshold where you hit a ceiling where you don't have any more penetration of transponders. And furthermore, pay by mail is a much lower collection rate process. Users just don't tend to, it's just not going to be as high collection of a payment method. Yeah. And so then the question is, well, what do you do with those 30, 40% of the users who just for whatever reason won't get a transponder? And what's I think interesting about NextPass, and a key part of our value proposition sort of broadly, both to the consumer as well as to the tolling authority, is that, okay, well, we are guaranteeing payment for our users. Yeah. So that's critical for a tolling authority because now they have 100% collection rate, collection for our customers. Yeah. Now there's one sort of small edge case there, which is like, okay, well, what about unreadable license plates? And that's true. That is a thing. But what does that represent? Across the total license plate based transactions, 5%, 2%, it depends on the region, but it's not a huge number, right? And so the benefits, I would say, kind of outweigh the drawbacks. And so we're offering sort of how I frame it is like, how can we offer a wide open front door? Right? How can we make it as easy for people to pay as possible? Yeah. And that's a win-win-win for us, for the consumer, for the tolling authority. And that's sort of how we want to frame it. Another kind of interesting wrinkle as a toll operator that we get to see that others don't. Yeah. And I can't give like specifics, but we see when users switch from a pay by mail method to a pay by app instead of transponder, for whatever reasons, if they want a transponder, like knock yourself out. Yeah. But their usage of the roadway increases significantly. And that's interesting because what's that?
They're not avoiding any tolls.
Exactly. It's like it's intuitive, but we actually see that borne out in the data. Yeah. That when you're not stressed about getting a bill in the mail and you're facing a decision where, I've got to take my daughter to soccer practice and there's traffic on the road and I could get there on time if I take the toll road, or I could not, and I could stay in the general purpose lanes. We see users kind of making that decision because they feel a safety that like, oh, okay, we can, I have this method of payment on file that's going to work. Right. Yeah. And so, sort of broad strokes, we don't view that as like a, NextPass in the near term. We don't view that at all as this is going to replace transponders. No, it's a complement to what's already out there. That's great. Leveraging the systems that exist and helping agencies with their collection challenges where they exist. Not all agencies have, collection challenges, but many do. Yeah. And giving users an option that's a little bit more native to what their experiences are.
Yeah. And you also have an aging population, right? Yeah. That, even for, I'm 51 and, for I'm 51, and so
I'm Gen X too. So
okay, there.
yeah.
So watch yourself.
With the new generation coming in.
You're outnumbered here. Yeah, you're outnumbered here.
But the idea, your payment, I'm open to texting a payment in, or I'm open to using a mobile app. But I mean, you still have a significant number of drivers that are more affluent, disposable income. You're 55 and ups that have they travel, they do everything, but they want different options. And I like what you said about that big open door, right? Come how you want to pay. That makes you comfortable, because it's about giving them a medium which they feel comfortable with, and honestly removing the pain point. Like I for example was traveling with my transponder, and I'd always put my transponder on the dash because I didn't want to stick it to the windshield. I didn't like it; it just bothered me. I'm a pain in the butt. But anyway, so I had it there, and I noticed recently a couple of the times the toll wouldn't pick it up, and so it's because I had it where I had it on the dash, and gosh darn it. So finally I comply, and I stick it up there, and now I'm miserable. But it's I had to, there comes a pain point for the user and the driver that we can alleviate and make it easier for them. And I certainly love to do by app rather than a transponder, or I would but I don't have that option.
I think for you guys as an organization, that says a lot about you and your company, looking ahead to the future, that those 10 years that
100
you were
years
talking about. Yeah. And evolving and being open to, having options for the multiple different drivers, customers as well. So
that's great.
I want to switch into the usage charging, RUC, national trends. We'd love to hear. I know you've worked with ODOT and on RUC pilots and things like that. So what are your findings from that rollout?
Yeah, that is also one of those sort of very niche. I mean, like if you ask average Joe on the street, they're like, I'm sorry, Gesundheit. What was that?
Exactly.
And so it's a niche thing, but it's something again that like sort of as I've become aware of and grown to understand, as you may be able to tell, like I'm a bit of a glass half full kind of a person, and I think that when you learn about and understand where the funding challenges are. Especially with the general purpose infrastructure that's existing on the roadways, like how's that going to get paid for? You think about, regardless of how you feel about climate initiatives or other things, like frankly, people drive EVs because they're fun, right? And I think that I think net like it's a good thing for more EVs on the roadway, right? High mileage a gallon vehicles on the roadway, like that. Regardless of where your political leanings might be, they're great, right? And so then if you think about how that creates a funding challenge for frankly, it exposes an archaic method of funding that infrastructure that most people don't even have a clue is something that exists, right? Like they don't even realize that 25, 50, 75 cents a gallon that they're paying at the pump is paying gas taxes. And so what do we do, right? Like what's the method? And when you start to evaluate the methods, well, we could raise taxes, right? To, going into a general fund and funding infrastructure. Well, that doesn't sound great because, nobody wants more taxes generally. Furthermore, it's the case that if you have more taxes, call me suspicious, let's say, but I worry that, that somehow those funds will begin to get used for other things, right? Yeah. And earmarked for other initiatives, not actually pay for the infrastructure. Then you also think about the sort of stopgap measures of, well, we can have high EV registration fees, right? To fund that gap, and that I think that does work in some capacity in the short term, but what it is a bit inelegant is that it doesn't reflect your usage. And so I always kind of think about like, my grandma before she passed away, she might drive 1,000 miles a year, right? And she shouldn't pay the same amount as like a FedEx delivery truck, right? Like that doesn't make sense. And so road usage charging in general, as a concept, I think is makes sense as a complementary sort of solution. I try to look at like where are there kind of win-wins across the board. And so when you think about what we've done in Oregon, which we're really, really excited to be partnered with them. The team at Oregon is outstanding. And I'm not just saying that, like we're really thrilled about the about the work that we're doing there, both in the connected vehicle ecosystem and their Origo project.
Yeah.
We see options as being a good thing. And that's kind of a theme,
Absolutely.
right? If you don't want to report on miles, cool. Pay your EV registration fee, right? If you'd rather pay less, then join the program, right? And if you know what I mean, like, and if you want to pay even potentially less, right? Do GPS enabled use cases where you track origin, destination, and in-state, out-of-state miles get calculated correctly, and all those sorts of things. And so, like, for us, the way that we look at road usage charging and why I think this is relevant, like why we're interested in it as a P3 company, is we view it as a tool in the tool belt. When you think about, and this is kind of maybe a comparison for road usage charging and a P3 project, I think about like our Charlotte I-77 project that we did, and they had 6 lanes, they needed 10 lanes. What are your choices? Well, that's a multi-billion-dollar project. You can issue a bond, you can raise taxes, or you can do what we did, which was deploy a P3. We take the private sector dollars, expand the road, and we still have 6 general purpose lanes, right, that are free, and we have 4 managed lanes, and the users who want to go faster, they pay. But guess what? Everybody wins because the speed on the general purpose lanes increases as well. To us, like, that's a tool in the tool belt.
Yeah.
And I think that RUC in general is also a tool in the tool belt. Like, where RUC fits, we think, very nicely is, how do we have consistent funding for infrastructure that's necessary, right? Like maintenance, potentially new projects. But when you have, a emergent need where we have to deploy a bunch of dollars and a bunch of complexity in a short period of time, we don't think that RUC is a very sort of good solution for that. And I think in general, with respect to RUC, P3s in general, and tolling, as well as things like congestion pricing, ultimately, like, and when I was kind of referencing earlier in the conversation, like, what is the 7 to 10 year? We see a bit of a convergence, as the technology becomes stronger, as the need for gantry technology and or enforcement technology gets more sophisticated, like the technology gets more sophisticated, the need for the infrastructure decreases. That's what's interesting to us about RUC and congestion pricing and tolling, kind of working together, because we always see a need for, like I said, like the complexity management of demand, the deploying of the dollars in the P3 context, right? But also, gas tax is broken; it isn't working, and we've got to figure out what the 7 to 10 year looks like. And so that's sort of how we're looking at road usage charging, as well as kind of the tolling complement and congestion pricing as well.
Yeah, and you've
hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, it did.
No, it did.
You've talked a lot about P3s. I kind of want to get your take there on how they're evolving in the US. I mean, do you think the public is more open to that idea now? Because it seems like it's been successful for you guys and others.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, it's very interesting because we see in every project at first, right, during the construction phase in particular, people are, not thrilled, right? Nobody wants to pay a new toll. But I think, frankly, it's more of the idea than it is the reality. When you look at, what we've been able to accomplish in I-66, outside the Beltway, or in Charlotte, or in Dallas, and some of the places where we have really robust projects. It's funny how, when we open, and this sort of sentiment over time, like, gets better and better and better and better, and we do these sort of economic impact studies, and this stuff you can find on the web and whatnot. But the short Cliff Notes version of our economic impact studies is, when you're connecting key cities, right, or you're connecting key areas within a city, and you're improving the speed with which users can move through the city, and managing congestion, managing demand, the economic impact is tremendous. Okay. And frankly, also, again, like, when you still have the same number of general purpose lanes in Charlotte that you did beforehand, but you now also have these two managed lanes, um, you know, that makes everything go faster. And so we see, kind of initially the public perception is less positive, but then over time, a region kind of gets used to it, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is actually kind of great because now I have options as a driver." And so, we think that evolution, you've seen a lot of activity in Georgia and Tennessee and some, other states are sort of looking at it. It's like, this can and does work. I think another piece of that that's really important is in situations where the public sector's tried to tie into super complex projects, they tend to sort of, they're so difficult to manage that they can get mired in lawsuits or change orders and these sorts of things, and they sort of drag on. They're over budget, it can. And in a P3, the public sector has some pretty strong. Let me just say it this way: the private sector has a lot of incentives to make sure that they're on time and on budget, and I think that's a positive thing, and I think the public really likes that too.
I was kind of curious if you wouldn't mind as we look at these questions here, and one of the ones that was you've touched, well, you touched on it briefly, but I really want to kind of dig into it is congestion pricing, and you talk about working in different areas, what can you maybe tell us a little bit about NextPass and how congestion pricing as it relates to New York and maybe just some of the experiences there?
Yeah, well, we did not lead that project, but we are participating as a payment method within New York right now in the congestion pricing initiative. Obviously, there's a lot of feelings about congestion pricing across the board, and there's legal dynamics that are at play. But what I think is interesting is I think many of our other partners in the public sector are watching closely what happens. And obviously we are as well, but again, I sort of see it as a tool in the tool belt. I don't think it's right for every region. I think in New York there is it's an island, and there's some really more manageable sort of inputs and outputs for drivers to come and go. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting, and we've had conversations that indicate that many are watching closely what's going to happen here, and I think that it could be something that we could see, roll out in other places in the coming years, kind of depending on how things shake out.
For those that are watching or listening that may not be familiar with congestion pricing, can you give an overview of that and kind of why it's such a hot topic right now?
Yeah, certainly. My apologies.
No.
Yeah. So I mean, conception. We've seen this in Europe with similar concepts, things like low emission zones, but essentially kind of geofencing a region, or actually, having infrastructure that surrounds region where there is a charge issued for someone entering into that region, with the intention to manage the congestion down, right? I've been in New York many times, and it's a bit of a nightmare to drive around, and the congestion is a problem. And so you can use this sort of tolling regime to manage down the congestion. Essentially, that's what that looks like. There's quite a few other flavors.
Sure.
Again, with low emission zones, and there's a low emission zone, I believe, in Madrid and other places that in Europe. But yeah, I think again, I don't think it's a solution for everywhere, but we do see a lot of this sort of converging. We believe that the tolling technology, the road usage charging technology, the congestion pricing technology, all those things we see with quite a lot of overlap. I mean, if you think about it, from a technology point of view, there's a car, there's a payment method, there's a driver, there, you know what I mean? And those entities are kind of common. And it's like, okay, well, how can all this kind of work together? Those are some of the questions we're trying to answer.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that for those that may not be familiar. So
sure.
We have just a few minutes left. So I want to ask, what is what is most exciting for you for the future and technology of tolling?
Good
Now or
question.
10 years from now? I guess there's something.
Yeah. So okay. So let me just say that like this is, I'm gonna just sort of voice my own opinion about it. Let's say this may not be an official opinion. How about that?
Okay.
No, but I mean, what I see, what I can't help but see is like when you think about the gantry technology, congestion pricing, road usage charging, tolling, so on and so forth. Like we have not had an iPhone level shift um, in, 25 years. I mean, to me, like a disruptive shift from gated toll booths to free flow was a massive shift. We have not had something like that since then. I think there's a lot of drawbacks to many of the solutions that are kind of out there testing it in the long run. And my personal perspective is that that the most like when you think about what is the key challenge for an evolution, and the key challenge is enforcement. How do we ensure like that we know that the user was there, that we have recognized that the user has taken whatever action that they've taken, and then all of those other problems frankly are pretty easy to solve. And so from my perspective, in terms of what's exciting in the evolution of tolling technology, and this is stuff that we're working on right now, the most logical replacement or evolution for enforcement is the vehicle itself.
Yes.
With all of the data in the vehicle, theoretically, as a user, I could hide my license plate.
Sure.
And be an evader. Am I really going to go in and pull out the 3 GPS sensors in my car?
Right.
Unlikely, right? It's unlikely that would occur. Furthermore, I think that, I know that we've had a lot of conversations around kind of the vehicle as a key part of the evolution of the technology. But I think that those conversations are not likely to be driven by tolling. Yeah. I think that I joke about this with my team. It's like there's sort of like elephants dancing, and the tolling space is, the mouse running in between the legs comparatively, because ultimately the car manufacturers are trying to figure out how to pay for and manage this new sort of sensor on the roadway. Yeah. And we think that there's significant safety implications that are really exciting, stuff that we're working on right now today. We think that there's implications around road usage charging, tolling, congestion pricing, so on and so forth. And to me, that's the thing that I can't solve today, but that the tactical actions we're taking are how can we more closely integrate with the most scalable and sustainable sort of sensor on the road, and that's the vehicle.
Yeah.
So,
I want to say something as we get ready to close here. I used to look at when I came to tolling. I don't know about you because I come basically from the technology sector as well. I saw, wow, here's where transportation is, and I thought, well, the other industries are up here with technology and making further advancements. Even just you look at recently just hit the news. Johnny Ive, who used to be the former chief officer at Apple, is now being bought out by, well, not bought out, partnering is the right phrase to use, with OpenAI, right? And now they have some new vision for new technology, right? And being on the bleeding edge is really great. But when you're impacting transportation, when you're impacting multiple users at multiple levels, you aren't just making optional purchases or products. Instead of looking at the transportation as being so far behind, maybe it's appropriately paced, the rate of technology growth that we're facing today, and why I think we need to grow. I think I sometimes at moments like this, I'm thinking maybe it's not such a bad thing, because now we can actually look at the lessons learned from some of the other integrators and partners and providers that are out there to figure out, okay, how can we take those case studies, those examples, and evolve here at the car level, right? Or change that. But to me, it's kind of I think it is an exciting time generally in technology, but not just because of the coin term everybody's using, throwing around AI, but I do think that innovation is really what we're really talking about. And I think if we can take these opportunities, we can do some amazing things here. But I do look at transportation as maybe it's not far behind, but maybe it's appropriately paced.
And speaking of innovation, what has been the most, rewarding thing for you leading innovation at NextMove?
Yeah.
No, appreciate that. And a lot. I mean, let me jump to that, but
Yeah.
if I may briefly, in response, I think a lot about, I remember when dot-com boom was happening.
Yeah.
And it was going to be everything. And then, iPhone and big data and blockchain and like cryptocurrency and like,
Yeah.
it's like crypto. I joke like cryptocurrency was going to, solve all of technology and do my taxes for me. And then it really ultimately, and now it's AI, right, is the thing that everybody talks about. And but to your point of being appropriately paced, excuse me, there's this sort of like super hype curve.
Yeah.
And then things, it's going to do everything for us with every new innovation. Then it bottoms out.
Yeah.
But there are actually real beneficial and disruptive opportunities that are born out of those technology innovations. And then it starts to kind of come back a bit, right? In terms of sentiment and hype and all that sort of stuff. And I think, like, for example, like with AI, we're kind of on the downslope, like the roller coaster has just kind of tipped over the edge. And I think some people are going to be brought down to earth a little bit, but there's also very clear applications that we're using right now that are really beneficial to what we're working on. And again, I think it is appropriately paced. I don't think tolling technology ought to be on the bleeding edge of anything, frankly. But we also don't want it's striking the balance between we don't want to be left behind, but we also don't want to be, the first one through the wall kind of gets bloody, let's say. Now, in terms of, what's been rewarding and exciting, I don't want to sound, trite, let's say. But man, I love my team. And by far, I mean, it's great to do cool things and cool projects, but to me, like, again, I don't want to sound corny here, but I don't know anybody on their deathbed who is going to be like, "Hey, man, I'm just so excited that I got rid of gantries." To me, they're gonna think about the relationships with their team, with their customers, with the people that they work with every day. And so for me, it's not so much the innovation at all, really. It's working with our public sector partners and trying to be real and good partners, working with my team, working with the people in the industry, being welcomed by the people in the industry. That's been, extremely rewarding and frankly, much, much more rewarding than, we don't get me wrong. I want to be successful in the technology innovations that we're driving. That's critical. But I would not say that that's the most rewarding piece. So.
Oh, that's great.
Well, thank you. I love that. Yeah. And shout out to some of the team members that we know, Claudia and you and
let's go.
Everyone
there you go.
seems amazing, and they're always at the forefront and very welcoming and informative.
So, well, we hope we're going to see you. Are you going to make your way out to
any conference?
Oregon?
Soon?
IBTTA conferences or
all the time. I'm there. I missed the one in Oklahoma City, unfortunately, which is the bummer because I normally am able to make it, but I was double booked and couldn't miss it. But anyway, yes, I'm at the conferences all the time and excited to be there, and look forward to shaking hands and in person saying hello.
All right,
well, Brad, we thank you for joining us. How can listeners follow your work or get in touch with NextMove or NextPass even?
Yeah, so nextpass.io is our website. It's pretty easy to navigate and find us there. For NextMove updates, we're on LinkedIn is probably the best place to find us. Our website is intentionally a little bit vague, so LinkedIn is probably a little bit better. But yeah, LinkedIn. We're across other social platforms too. Probably LinkedIn and nextpass.io is our best spot.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, again, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to share this. And I'm
Sure.
with your host.
Pleasure's mine.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. And I'm Alex Kalie. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you soon in our next episode of Toll Talk.